Hello, this is Grant Hughes of Grant Hughes Investigates on YouTube. Please hit that like button right out of the gate, share the video, and subscribe if you like my content. Today's video is a deeper look at Bryan Kohberger's bushy eyebrows and the conspiracy theory that a lot of these wackos have out there that think that law enforcement actually suggested the bushy eyebrows to Dylan Mortensen for her to say. However, I have information that I was given at the very beginning of the case where somebody said that one of the witnesses saw somebody with bushy eyebrows. And let's look at the timing of that to disprove all the crazy people out there. Okay, here we go. Let's go through what it says in the probable cause document. It says at approximately 4:17 a.m. a security camera located at 1112 King Road, a residence immediately to the northwest of 1122 King Road, and as we remember, that's this building right here, the house where Ethan Chapin, Xana Kernodle, Madison Mogen, and Kaylee Gonzalez were all killed in, is right here. Right? This is the 1112 King Road camera. That surveillance camera picked up distorted audio of what sounded like voices or a whimper, followed by a loud thud. A dog can also be heard barking numerous times starting at 4:17 a.m. The security camera is less than 50 feet from the west wall of Kernodle's bedroom. And I remember they also determined that the dog would have been outside based on what it sounded like. They did experiments on that. Then Dylan Mortensen stated she opened her door for the third time. She had previously opened it, obviously 2 other times, after she heard the crying. So the whimpering sound is what she heard. And then she saw a figure clad in black clothing and a mask that covered the person's mouth and nose, walking towards her. Dylan Mortensen described the figure as 5 feet 10 inches or taller, a male, not very muscular, but athletically built with bushy eyebrows. The male walked past Dylan Mortensen as she stood in a frozen shock phase. The male walked towards the back sliding glass door. Dylan Mortensen locked herself in her room after seeing the male. This leads investigators to believe that the murderer left the scene. So if you take a look at this, this is Xana Kernodle's room, and perhaps the loud thud was her dropping to the floor, or it could be something else. We don't know. But apparently he leaves right after that. And then that room over there is Dylan Mortensen's room. And that's probably something similar to this, maybe not open quite as much, but she's looking out her door and, assume this is Kohberger. I didn't put this person in the scene to be Kohberger. I used him to place a camera on the top of his head as he walked through the house. That's how I chose to do my walkthroughs that I've already done in the past. So it was probably something like that. And then inside the room, it would look something like this. And this might be an interesting look if I make it kind of half see-through here. See, there she is looking through her door, and there's where Kohberger would be walking from. And then interestingly, right above is where Kaylee Gonzalez and Madison Mogen were. So she heard everything really clearly, and she was probably absolutely freaked out. Okay, so that's just some information on how she saw the bushy eyebrows. And as we see in the documents, the phone leaves Pullman, Washington again in the sort of mid-morning hours. After returning home around 5:30, it leaves again, the vehicle leaves, and his phone is on now. So it says, further review indicated that Kohberger's phone utilized cellular resources on November 13, 2022 that are consistent with Kohberger's phone leaving the area of his residence at approximately 9 a.m. and traveling to Moscow, Idaho. Specifically, Kohberger's phone utilized cellular resources that would provide coverage to the King Road residence between 9:12 a.m. and 9:21 a.m. Kohberger's phone next utilizes cellular resources that are consistent with his phone traveling back to the area of Kohberger's residence and arriving to the area at approximately 9:32. That's absolutely consistent. It takes about 10 minutes. 10 to 15 minutes to drive from Moscow, Idaho, back to Pullman, Washington. So when you take a look at that, you can see that he was in the area for about 9 minutes, and perhaps some of the time he was probably driving away and it was just still pinging off the same tower. But I think he drove back to the residence. This is at around 9:21. And then we see a picture after Kohberger got back home, let's say 9:32 to 9:40, he's inside of his house. And then at 10:31, he takes this picture. So about an hour, 50 minutes to an hour after he got home, he takes this picture. He's so excited about what he has done. I mean, think about this picture just in general. Who takes a picture at 10:31 in their bathroom doing a thumbs up? Now, also pay attention to his eyebrows in this picture here. See how much more bushy they are back then? And then you compare it to what he looks like more recently. You can see that he's removed some of the bushiness. And he's going to try to trick the jury, but thankfully law enforcement actually has a picture from that very morning of what he looked like. Okay, now let's take a look at this. Detective learned Kohberger's name only after genetic genealogy. A lead detective in the case, Moscow Police Department Corporal Brett Payne, said he didn't hear Bryan Kohberger's name mentioned until December 19th, 2022, more than a month after the killings. That was a result of investigative genetic genealogy that was being undertaken by the FBI. Okay, so that's showing that they didn't even know what his name was in the Moscow Police Department until December 19th, 2022. Now let's take a look at this. On November 25th, 2022, Moscow Police Department asked area law enforcement agencies to be on the lookout for a white Hyundai Elantra in the area. On November 29th, 2022, at approximately 12:28 a.m., so just remember these dates. So on the 25th, they were asked to start looking out and then for a white Elantra. And then on November 29th, at approximately 12:28 a.m., Washington State University police officer Daniel Tiengo queried white Elantras registered at WSU. As a result of that query, he located a 2015 white Elantra with a Pennsylvania license plate, LFZ 8649. This vehicle was registered to Bryan Kohberger, hereafter Kohberger, residing at 1630 Northeast Valley Road, apartment 201, Pullman, Washington. 1630 Northeast Valley Road is approximately 3/4 of a mile from the intersection of Stadium Way and Cougar Way. All right, so let's take a look at then another officer. So it says, on the same day at approximately 12:58 a.m., WSU officer Curtis Whitman was looking for white Hyundai Elantras and located a 2015 white Hyundai Elantra at 1630 Northeast Valley Road in Pullman. In the parking lot, and it says 1630 Northeast Valley Road is an apartment complex that houses WSU students. Officer Whitman also ran the car and it returned to Kohberger with a Washington tag. And then the detective writing this said, I think it might be Payne, said, I reviewed Kohberger's Washington State driver's license information and photograph. This license indicates that Kohberger is a white male with a height of 6 feet and weighs 185 pounds. Additionally, the photograph of Kohberger shows that he has bushy eyebrows. Kohberger's physical description is consistent with the description of the male Dylan Mortensen saw inside the King Road residence on November 13th. Now, here's where it gets interesting, or even more interesting. So you notice those dates, the 29th of November, and two officers just happened to, find Kohberger's residence, and then after that time frame, Brett Payne, perhaps, or the other detectives, there's two detectives that wrote a similar probable cause. They got the Kohberger's name on December 19th. However, at the beginning of the case, they found out that he had bushy eyebrows. So it isn't a conspiracy. They didn't even know who this person was at this time. Now look at the date of this email that I got. This is Tuesday, November 22nd. So this is even before the officers were looking for a white Elantra on the Pullman, Washington campus. In fact, the request went out on the 25th to be on a lookout for a white Elantra. This email I got here is on November 22nd. Now, some of the information is incorrect, like, because this is, apparently the person is the mother of a friend of one of the victims, and through conversations with people that were there, she got this information. So listen to this. Well, as it's already out there that other people stopped by, they came by after one of the survivors called them. So this is about like when the 911, right before the 911 call, people started showing up. One of the survivors saw a man come in as they were going to go out of their bedroom. So this is Dylan Mortensen. And when they say came in, that's just her, this person who's repeating this. It's we all know that it's when Kohberger's leaving at that time. They're heading out the sliding glass door. But, somebody through the telephone game has it a little off there. And it says, of course, it wasn't strange for people they didn't know to be there. That survivor didn't recognize the person and was already in their pajamas. This is Dylan Mortensen. So they didn't leave their room and lock the door and went to bed. The person they saw, this is after he saw him the third time. Before that, the door wasn't locked. Remember, she kept going in and out. Maybe it was locked and she would just open it up. For the first 2 times she looked out, and the third one she shut it and locked it. The person they saw had like their shirt or turtleneck covering their mouth. Because remember, in the probable cause it said had their mouth and nose covered, but maybe after further reflection they came up with that it looked more like a balaclava. And it seemed, and by the way, Bryan Kohberger purchased a balaclava in January of 2022. Now the Kohbergers will say that they had her say it was a balaclava to make it match Kohberger. However, she mentioned balaclava before his name was even out there. Okay? So that's the thing, is Dylan Mortensen has mentioned bushy eyebrows since the beginning, and we know that because look at this email right here. This is November 22nd, only 9 days after the murders, and Kohberger's name wasn't anywhere near anything at this point. And there's some other interesting stuff in here. It says the person they saw had like their shirt or turtleneck covering their mouth as though they had just come in from out of the cold. They didn't see their face, but the person had bushy eyebrows. See, I had this information, and right when an arrest was made, I came forward with the information, and boom, he had bushy eyebrows. They are keeping that information from the public as they don't want any retaliation from the perpetrator, and that's exactly why I didn't mention it on my show until there was an arrest made. The perpetrator did not see the survivor when they were going to leave their room. In this case, it says the perpetrator did not see Dylan Mortensen, and Dylan Mortensen thinks he saw her, but I don't think so. She saw one of his eyebrows and assumes he saw her because of that. So this part is about Jack, Kaylee's boyfriend, or ex-boyfriend. So Jack is the ex-boyfriend of Kaylee. He was not asleep, as, of course, based on what I was told, reported. So they say that he was asleep, but he wasn't. Kaylee was, as told to me, not victim blaming. This person's not victim blaming while they're writing here, but she was kind of a spoiled brat or something. This is what they said, okay? I'm not going to edit this. It just says what she heard was that she was sort of spoiled brat and told Jack that she wanted a break. Jack was, and they'd been together for years. Jack was with a friend when Kaylee called all those times. So remember, it was like at 12:40 something to 12:50. Kaylee called Jack numerous times, and then Madison called, and then Kaylee tried calling one more time. It says Jack was with a friend when Kaylee called those times because she was trying to get Jack to come over. She was intoxicated. So she was persistent and made the statement about them sharing a dog, etc. Jack's friend was teasing Jack about being, pee-whipped. I'm not going to read the word. You can see it on the screen there. And that he didn't need to answer every time she called and play by her rules. So he didn't answer, and Maddie said, "We'll call from my phone." So Maddie was like, "Hey, let's call from my phone. Maybe he'll answer. He'll pick up." But of course, he didn't answer. They were playing lovers' games. Jack is very distraught and having some guilt and will need counseling, as it was told to me. He said if he'd picked up or had gone over, they may all still be alive. And it's actually more likely that he would have died. Yeah, I mean, it is possible that if he was there, Kohberger would have assessed the situation and not gone in. But I mean, Kohberger seemed absolutely committed that night. The survivors heard sounds or a fight or something, but stayed in their room and kept the door locked. They said that no one ever came to their door to try to come in. So even after they had their door shut, nobody tried to like jiggle the doorknob or try to get into the room. They called their friends and told them something happened. That must be in the morning. Can they come and see what was happening or going on? That's when Ethan was found, and they all ran out of the house and called 911. See, I think this is opposite, because we hear on the 911 call where it seems like people thought they were unconscious, and the operator is the person who sort of encouraged them to go into the room, as we heard, and that's when I think it's Ethan's best friend went into the room, looked in there. I don't know if he had to open the door by shoving something. We don't really know. But he opened the door and he saw Xana and Ethan in there, and that's when he said, get out, let's get out, because he saw the blood. All right, so it's kind of the opposite of what was told in here. That's when Ethan was found, and they all ran out of the house. Remember, get out, and called 911, so it's reverse, and reported an unconscious person. They never saw the other three. They were found by law enforcement after responding to the call. The phone was one of the survivors' phones. They were too nervous, scared, etc. to call and just handed whomever it was that called their phone. See, that's not accurate either. As we know now, Bethany Funk actually called 911 and was on the phone. And then, yes, the phone was passed around to different people after that. So you can see how there's just a little bit misinformation, but part of it's accurate. Then when Ethan was found, and they all ran out of the house and called 911 and reported an unconscious person, they never saw the other three. They were found by law enforcement after responding to the call. Of course, there's nothing known to the public regarding this information, so I can't say they are absolute truths. But it was, by the way, it's pretty close, you guys. Again, they are keeping all this close to the vest to protect the survivors' witnesses. They don't want the perp to know what they know, but they are suspecting, and by that I mean those around this case, friends, etc., and not necessarily law enforcement, that it was someone that had eyes on Kaylee, and maybe someone that had seen her at one of the bars Kaylee frequented and possibly had been rejected by her. I mean, I don't know. I don't think Kaylee, though, is the target. I think Madison is, but it might be a similar reason, and perhaps it was, maybe it was both of them. I mean, I guess we don't really know, but Kaylee wasn't supposed to even be there at the time. So she seems like she was just in the wrong place at the wrong time that night. I think it's possible if she was in her room and didn't even wake up when Kohberger was there, and which might even be likely because I think he was going to stealthily, go in there, kill Madison and get out there, and perhaps even leave the knife sheath as a calling card. We don't know. I guess one day we'll find out the answer, or we may never know the answer if that was left as a calling card. As far as where the bodies were found and the times things occurred were not told to me, this person said, or why the perp would kill the four of them. Also, the dog is still basically a puppy. I know it looks full grown, but it's still very young and is used to a lot of people coming and going. I think that's all the info I have. If I think of anything else or find anything else, I can send it to you if you're interested. Yeah, and at the end it says, glad you don't want to slow back, the slow back and forth either. Neither do I. Yeah, so a lot of times when people send me emails, they'll go, Gray, I've got some really interesting information. Do you want to hear it? And I'll say, of course I wanted to hear it. But you should have just put that information in the first email, then I could read it and respond to it. Then the next email reply will be something like, oh, I just wanted to make sure you wanted to see it, so yeah, let me know. And then I have to go, yeah, of course, I want to see it. And then it goes on and on and on. It's like, just if you have a tip or some kind of information that you want to give me, just send it on the first email. But if you have any information on a case, just send me the information directly. All right, now there was another piece of information. Now look at the date here, November 23rd, 2022. This is actually regarding the balaclava. Apparently a guy in a mask walked into the house. So again, look at the date, November 23rd, 2022. That is 2 days before people were told to be on the lookout for a white Elantra, and a month, almost a month before Kohberger's name was even identified by the FBI. So there isn't a way that anybody could have back engineered and said, ooh, say you found a balaclava because we know this other guy that we're looking at bought one. They hadn't even got the Amazon search warrant information back yet. Apparently a guy in a mask walked into the house. I'm sure the door was unlocked. The two girls that survived heard rummaging and they locked their doors. It's kind of a party house, so they figured it was just some random kids, and they were in bed, so they just locked their doors. They called two other Pi-Fis to come over in the morning to check things out because they hadn't heard from the other roommates. And see, that sort of fits in with all those text messages trying to get a hold of Kaylee, Madison, even Ethan Chapin, and Xana Kernodle. So they, in the morning they called the friends. They came over. This seems to match that really well. And it says they hadn't heard from the other roommates, and they opened Xana's door to see her stabbed to death with her boyfriend. So they opened the door apparently, but I think the 911 call was made first. I don't think anybody went into that room prior. They just could see through maybe a little opening in the door, or perhaps even under the door, that somebody was on the floor and possibly passed out. And it wasn't until the 911 call where they looked in, and that's why the best friend was so shocked. He was like, get out, let's get out. Because he just saw the horrific sight for the first time. And it's really obvious that it came after the 911 call. All right, guys, that's going to do it for this video regarding the bushy eyebrows. As you can see, it really is something that Dylan Mortensen said early on out of her own mind. And there's no coercion by law enforcement to get her to say that, because they had no idea who Bryan Kohberger was. And I just proved to you that that information was known at the very latest by November 22nd, because I was sent it in an email. Okay, so that must have been something that was around from the very, very beginning. That's only 9 days after. All right, so thank you all for watching. Leave a comment in the comment section. Let me know what you think. And subscribe to the channel. But man, just hit that like button. It's really simple. It's one of the easiest things to do in the world, as a matter of fact. Let me play this for you. This is what you should do. Hit that like button, hit that like button 10, 20, hit that like button 40, hit that like button 50, 55, 60, 65, 70, hit that like button. It's one of the easiest things to do in the world. Use your nose, use your toes, whatever blows, hit that like button. There you go. Thank you very much. All right, everybody. Thank you for watching. And as I always say, until next time, be safe out there.